This episode is brought to you by Peacock. The new Peacock original documentary, Matthew Perry, A Hollywood Tragedy, dives deep into the beloved actor's rise to fame and his tragic death. 5 people, including Perry's personal assistant, 2 medical doctors, and an alleged Hollywood drug dealer known as the Ketamine Queen, were charged with conspiracy to illegally provide Perry with the ketamine. Explore the details of the case in this heartbreaking special, streaming now only on Peacock.
Welcome to Worse Than You with me, Mo Fry-Pasick. I'm Mo, and every week I'm asking today's most captivating artists how they got their acts together. This show isn't about their best or most famous work. It's about the work that means the most to them, their creative process, and how they make their art. And why? This week's guest is a writer, host, and producer. Her credits include Wondery's Dis and Tell, Pushkin's Revisionist History Live, and Glamorous Trash with Chelsea Devantez. And she's the host and creator of Cramped, a new podcast. I said that fun, but it's a new podcast about period pain and why it's so often dismissed and untreated. And I am genuinely so excited to be speaking. Please welcome to the pod, Kate Helen Downey. Ready, set, show!
Hello!
Welcome, Kate. I'm genuinely so excited to have you because, you know, one of my missions in this podcast is pushing that everyone, no matter their role, has a creative process. And especially someone like you, who I look at as an educator and a healer, because you are, you know, lifting that veil of mystery or shame around people's pain. And that is so exciting. So I would love for you just to tell us a little bit about Cramped, your new podcast.
Yeah, so Cramped is a 10-episode limited series. It follows my story of having horrible, debilitating period cramps for 22 years without getting a diagnosis or an effective treatment. So I set out to finally find an answer, like, to all these questions that feel pretty basic to me, like, why do cramps hurt? Why am I in pain? What's causing this? What's wrong with me? Why are so many other people in pain, and yet doctors look at me like they don't know what I'm talking about? Like,
and it's all good.
Yeah, oh, that just happens to some people. Like, no, I don't think so.
Some people like, no, it shouldn't.
No. And then along the way, we do deep dives into the structural reasons, the historical reasons, the cultural reasons, why these answers are the way they are, or why we can't even get the answers to these very simple questions.
It's a daunting task that I'm happy you're setting out to do. It is.
It's been a year of rage, honestly.
Surely. Because, you know, it's like I also find in my own journey and speaking with people, the rage tends to come from like the people who want to support you, who think, oh, well, surely we've studied that. If everyone's in pain, we must have. It's that sort of bystander effect. It's like it feels more aggressive than the evil people being like, F women.
Right.
There's so many levels of frustration. So to go through that and to still like educate and find an answer, like, thank you, because I think everyone's exhausted.
Yes, correct. And period pain is just one of many reasons why a lot of us are exhausted, but it's one that should be easily dealt with, and it's not.
Completely. I myself, my family, you know, it's the classic stories where it's like, oh yeah, of course your aunts would pass out in the middle of the school. Like, and it's like those painful things that I laugh. And my sister and I were talking, because we don't have like the quote unquote death cramps every period that you talk about in your podcast, but we get it about almost like clockwork every third. And so then I went to a doctor and I was like, oh, is this season, like, you know, where, you know, sort of these phases. They told me not to bring like spiritual stuff in. And I was like, okay. And like, these are good doctors.
Yeah.
It's so ridiculous. So in your process, because 22 years of them going to doctors, trying to get answers, I'm wondering, what strikes me the most is like, when you pick up the mic, was that from exhaustion? Was it, oh, I have this skill set. Well, this is part of my life. I'll talk about this. Like, what was that sort of breaking point?
It's crazy. Like, the tagline of my podcast is I got more answers with a microphone than I did with a uterus, because going to doctors for 22 years, I got zip and taking a year to interview doctors with a microphone, I got all these answers and all this information. And so it's like, well, I think having a uterus entitles you to information about your uterus, but sometimes you got to pick up a microphone to get that, apparently. And it was at a time that I had given up on getting real answers. I was looking for a really personal project to be the first project that I hosted a podcast for. I've produced lots of other people's projects. I like know how to do it now. And I'm like, okay. And there are so many things that I'm interested in, but I really wanted to do something that like I had skin in the game where and the kinds of projects I really respond to are ones where someone is searching for an answer and you are going along on that search with them, because then the host doesn't have to be the expert or the translator or, you know, ultimately they are like your guide, but you're just like along for the ride. And I don't like being alone for anything. And so I'm very much an extrovert and someone who likes people around me all the time. And so the idea of like going through a process where I actually get a diagnosis and I actually like don't stop until I get treatment. The idea of doing that alone is really scary, but the idea of doing that even like theoretically with people like listening along and like joining me feels much better and almost like, well, even if I get nothing, then at least we have this podcast, you know?
Which I adore. And also it's like such a compelling listen because you aren't a reporter going, but what about this? But what about that? Like, which is like hard to have someone be your avatar when they're a reporter because you're like, but you don't, but as this, and you're like living it and we get to live through that.
Yeah. I think another reason it felt like I could do it now is I spent almost all of those 22 years, but especially the years of my like teens and early 20s, feeling so alone. I grew up in rural Maine and like I didn't talk to people in high school about this. I didn't talk to people until like later in college about what I was experiencing. And of course, once I started talking to people, I was like, oh, I'm not the only one that experiences this. There are actually quite a few other people that I randomly meet, which means like the percentage of people experiencing very similar stuff to what I'm experiencing has to be pretty high. And so the fact that the reaction from all of my doctors is like, weird, no idea, like, yep, some women just get bad cramps, like, dunno, that's actually like really unacceptable.
Here's some random meds that'll mess up your liver for the next 20 years.
Exactly. And so like, so I really wanted to make something where it's like, I don't want anyone else to have to feel this alone. Like I want the podcast I wish had existed when I was 18, if podcasts had existed then.
So how has that like process been? Because I go like, you know, I say like the 3 Ps that I keep coming up with on this podcast are permission, process, and perspective. And I think you get perspective by, you know, taking permission and giving yourself permission. And in those spaces where it's so easy to self-gaslight, or I'm a very literal processor. So when someone's like, everybody gets cramps, I'm like, okay, I guess we're all in this hell.
Right.
And it's like, no, they're not having what you know what I mean? And so I'm wondering like for that permission to say the thing, like that's very scary to be like, you know, you wonder if you're going to be believed. 2, you can self-gaslight. 3, other people will gaslight you. And so was that like 1,000 attempts at sharing your story? Or was it, you know, like, oh, you told a trusted friend and then felt emboldened to continue sharing and understanding that maybe your experience like was unique and not dismissible?
Yeah, I think we have like a very strong mental block about talking about periods. And even if we think of ourselves and we are in all other walks of life, like we will talk about anything, we are not even thinking about how we don't talk about this really big part of our lives. And
100%.
First and foremost, I'm a yapper. Like I
love it. Me too.
I will talk to anyone about anything. And as soon as I started talking about it with people, I had these like really positive reinforcement events. Like when I first started talking about it with friends in college where, you know, 90% of the time people will be like, no, what are you talking about? Weird. Like, I don't experience that. That 10% of the time somebody will be like, oh my God, wait, yes, me too. Wait, I thought I was the only one. I thought I was the only one. Like, and you have this like almost like falling in love moment of just like, you get giddy, you get like, you have this deep connection and deep shared experience in something that you have felt so alone with, but you find a person, and then like you can text that person, just be like, my cramps are so fucking bad today. Like how have yours been lately? Does the winter make them worse? Like, you just kind of have someone to share that with, and it's so game changing. And you can say like, hey, I'm stuck at home, like on the toilet. Can you pick me up like some more ibuprofen or something? And they understand, they get it. They're like, of course, I'll be there in 10 minutes.
Like, it's so much easier than like knowing someone's holding space for you despite not being able to get it. And that's so nice when people do that. That's so great.
Yes.
But it is also like, what a weight to like have to receive even. So when someone's just like, I understand, it's so nice and easy and community.
And something I didn't realize or think about till I started doing this podcast was we have one word, cramps, for a variety of experiences that everybody experiences differently. Everything from like slight achiness and discomfort all the way to like completely debilitated passing out from pain. And the only word that we have to communicate what is happening is cramps. Like, of course we're not talking more about it. Like, what words would we use? If I say to someone like, my cramps are really bad, like, how do they know what I'm talking about?
There's no scale. There's no language. Yeah.
It's like that thing of like, 12 different words for snow or whatever. Like, if we don't talk about something, then we don't develop the language to talk about. That's why I started saying death cramps, because it's like, there's a difference between when I have regular cramps and when I have these completely debilitating, like, take me out cramps. And I started using it as shorthand with my family and my friends who knew about it, of like, can't come, death cramps. And like, then they understand this isn't a normal cramp situation. This is an illness. This is like a completely debilitating event that's happening to me.
Which is like so many folks, right? Like, especially chronic illness, like genuinely can't come to something, or like are quote unquote flakes. And there isn't grace given for that. And I get why there isn't, because it's unseen disabilities, and but then that person has to deal with not only their pain or illness, but the internalized shame for not being good enough or a friend, or then push through it to show up for people at the cost of themselves. Yeah. And it's like this awful cycle. So then when people are finally like sort of embracing this and supported by it, they even realize like how bad they actually are. Like, I'm sure, because it's like you even open with like you're at work and it's like, I used to take ibuprofen before, and it's like, it doesn't mean you still didn't have to live in this world with death cramps.
Yeah. And it's also so hard when it's a dynamic disability where you are sometimes fine. You are sometimes feeling great, and you are like able to go to things and show up as your full self. And that, so it's like Tuesday, I could go to a friend's birthday party, be totally fine. Thursday, I could not be able to go to work. I could not be able to text because my eyes are crossed from the pain. Like, and it's really hard to explain to somebody who's not like seeing what's happening to you with their eyes. It's really hard to explain, like, both of those are real things.
Completely. Did you find yourself having to explain yourself often?
No, but I also pushed myself too hard. I wanted to have nothing wrong with me. And especially in my teens and 20s, I would just white knuckle it. And partly because of how much pressure is put on us. I was doing tours of the Metropolitan Museum. I was running a theater. Like, there, you tell yourself, like, I have to show up to this. Like, I can't not do it. And you do whatever you have to do to meet those expectations. And then you pay the price for it later. Like, I had so many breakdowns, and I just pushed myself too far so many times. And you suffer. Like, you pay.
You long-term suffer. Yeah. Like, it's like, you then develop chronic IBS, being all these different, SIBO, because you're susceptible to those things. But then the worst part is, like, a doctor will tell you, well, that was your only problem, instead of like a root cause. Because there's no holistic medicine. You're going to individual symptoms being treated.
Right. And that's how our whole medical system is set up, is to like one guy for one piece of your body and everything else is not his problem. But that's not how our bodies work.
Not related. Not related. Yeah. And you're crazy to think they're related. Like,
yeah. Yeah.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile with a message for everyone paying big wireless way too much. Please, for the love of everything good in this world, stop. With Mint, you can get premium wireless for just $15 a month. Of course, if you enjoy overpaying, no judgments, but that's weird. Okay, one judgment. Anyway, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
Every cup of Nespresso coffee is an invitation to transform your morning routine into a ritual you can treasure each and every day. Using the Virtuo Pup, a simple touch of the button freshly brews bold aromas and a rich, velvety crema layer for delicious cafe-quality coffee at home. Whether you enjoy your coffee hot or over ice, every sip, every morning is unforgettable. Nothing tastes like Nespresso coffee. Visit Nespresso.com or our app to explore our full range of easy-to-use machines and coffees not found anywhere else.
it always makes me laugh because I should have been, but because I was so high functioning, I wasn't diagnosed neurodivergent until my 30s. Mm-hmm. And we had all these sort of death cramp situations, all these. And then I was obviously, because I'm, ADHD, my ass was researching the shit out of this. And then I'm going, okay, so wait, how does that, so that affects hormones and dopamine. And I was on birth control at 14 affecting progesterone. So I was like, those are both hormones. And then I'm going to these doctors, I'm going, okay, so how do they interact? I was like, how does that affect because of my neurotype? And they're like, well, you're a female body. And I was like, yeah. I was like, well, we're talking and it was crazy because then I felt I was doing this thing where I gaslit myself I'm not a doctor. But then I looked it up and the first study on hormone cycles with ADHD women was 2017. 2017.
Here's the thing about medical research. Medical research hates hormonal fluctuations. They seem to think these are very smart people, right, with multiple degrees, with doctorates doing this medical research, and they're like, what we couldn't possibly do is study how hormone fluctuation affects a drug or a person's digestion or literally anything.
They're like, just don't drink grapefruit juice. It's like, okay.
Even to the point where even studies done on human cells and animals are done on male cell lines and male rats and mice. And however you feel about animal studies, fine. But we are not even testing, and female rodents have a 4-day hormonal cycle, and they're like, that's too much.
Too long. Too long.
But it's
the money.
But half the people who are going to be taking this drug have these hormone fluctuations. So and something that blew I'm on an SSRI, and I didn't know that an SSRI affects you totally different. If you are an ovulating person, it affects you very differently at different parts of your cycle. In your luteal phase, your body produces much less serotonin. And so the SSRI is it should be dosed differently. There should be a different way we take that.
%, because then what happens is then over time, you're progesterone, estrogen are interacting with that and get used to that and then adapt and produce in a way that throws off your own cycle.
Yeah.
And it's but it's so funny because in high school, I went on SSRIs and I noticed pretty acutely. I was 3 days before my period, I'm gonna die. And even as a kid, you're expressing that and saying that. And then they go, yeah, maybe we should up the dose. And you go, okay. And so when you're interacting with this and encountering all of this and hearing these things, I'm wondering if it's something you tucked away of just this is my life, or is it was it a consistent I am going to keep talking about this, and just as far as your ability to break through all of it?
I think when it first started happening to me when I was 14, 15, I was I want to get answers. Like, because I was a healthy kid. And so like being in that much pain, like I knew something was deeply wrong. I knew like being in this much pain is not normal. If this was anything other than a period, you would be rushing me to the hospital to like get my appendix out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, but the fact, but I say I'm on my period and you go, oh, here's a hot water bottle. Like, yeah, sorry, you're dealing with cramps. And it's like, while I'm throwing up every 10 minutes for hours and hours. And it's like,
and
we're
sweating,
fine with
you
this?
said. Yeah.
Oh
like,
God, full body sweat. Like it's a full body reaction. And and it's literally like something is very wrong. And so my mom took me to like my first gynecologist, and what she told me was, a lot of women get bad cramps, but they'll go away when you have your first baby. And to tell that to a 14-year-old is...
No, why don't you get on that? Get on that. 15's a good year for a baby.
And
no,
also,
15's
by the
a
way,
really good year for a baby.
that's not statistically true. Like a lot of people have basically when you have a baby, everything changes. Everything about you gets like reshuffled and like completely changed. And so like some people do experience like less severe cramps afterwards. Some people experience more severe cramps afterwards. So your mileage may vary, but they love to tell you to just have a baby.
That's literally what they told me about acne too. They're like,
Oh
that goes away after you have a baby. That seems to be like a calling card. And you're kind of like, again, you're 15 and you're like, okay. Whereas like, thank God the masses get an opportunity to hear this. And the success is like telling you how much people didn't understand. But it's like, no, this community has been experiencing this phenomena forever. These people are in pain and they're actually saying I'm in pain. And you're going, I didn't understand that. I didn't.
Right. And whose fault is it that you don't understand? It's not my fault. Like,
that's the hard part.
I'm going to you. I'm asking you to explain it to me. Like, you're a gynecologist. This is your area. Like, come on.
How are you approaching? Because you're only doing 10 episodes. So how are you, like, one, can you tell us, do you feel like you've come to a conclusion that is satisfactory? Or two, how did you approach, like, making sure you're sort of honing in on the aspects that you wanted to attack intuitively of like, this could be an answer?
Yeah. I really started from a place of just like, I think I know which directions I'm going to go in. Like, I know I'm interested in the research being done, and I want to do an episode about like what research is being done. What do we know? What do we not know? How are we finding out? I knew I wanted to do an episode on like mental health, like how, because we when we think about periods and period cramps, we think a lot about just the physicality of it. Does it hurt? Does it not hurt? How do we go about our day? Like, how much are we bleeding? What we don't think about is like, does my depression get worse?
Yep.
Do my relationships with other people suffer because of what's happening to my body physically? And like, is the way that I'm being treated by the medical system affecting my long-term mental health, not just my physical health? And so
outside of the thing itself, yeah.
Yes. So as I was like pursuing a diagnosis and seeing which avenues were going to like yield results in that, I was also diving deep into these topics. I do have a diagnosis now. It's actually coming out in 2 weeks. The episode where I talk about my diagnosis is coming out in 2 weeks, so I can't say what it is yet.
No, please, no. Good teaser. Very good teaser.
But it's coming out in episode 6 instead of episode 10 because getting my diagnosis was a way different feeling than I thought it would be. Because I had attached all of this like...
I just got chills. I did. Like, oh my gosh.
Whole life... Yeah, I mean, my whole life, I just like had this expectation of like, if I could just get a diagnosis, then I can get treatment. Then I won't be in pain anymore. Yes, like the diagnosis is like what will give me relief. And I got the diagnosis and it was like, oh, cool. It's not a curable condition. It's something that we don't have great treatments for. It's actually something
more of the same.
I have like more questions and they're different questions or they're like more specific, but it's not just, okay, you got a diagnosis, here's the treatment, done. And that's like obviously what we hope for with a diagnosis.
That's heartbreaking.
It put me in kind of a depression of like, this isn't the end of the journey. Like, I just want it to be over. And it's never going to be over. And I have to deal with this the rest of my menstruating life. Like, I don't want to.
Did any part affirm you in that? Like, did any part of the diagnosis? Or was it like, okay, that's just a name for what I already know?
Once I kind of got past the disappointment of like, there isn't just a solution, it was really interesting to connect it to all of these other symptoms that I've been experiencing my whole life that I did not know were connected, like back pain, constipation, rosacea. There's like all these things where it's like, yeah, that's the core. Your diagnosis is actually the thing that's causing all of those things that you never thought were connected and you never considered. And so that was really cool.
This episode is brought to you by State Farm. From your morning podcast to your afternoon playlist, State Farm knows you personalize your entire day. And that's why State Farm helps you personalize your insurance with the State Farm Personal Price Plan. It offers coverage options that help protect what you care about most at an affordable price just for you. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. Prices vary by state. Options selected by customer. Availability and eligibility may vary.
Business taxes. Was stressing about all the time and all the money you spent on your taxes.
This is my bill?
Now Business Taxes is a TurboTax small business expert who does your taxes for you and offers year-round advice at no additional cost, so you can keep more money in your business. Now this is taxes. Intuit TurboTax. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com/business. Only available with TurboTax Live Full Service.
That part is so complicated because I understand that from an autoimmune perspective. Like, and I'm someone like my dad's a doctor, my mom's a nurse. Like, you know, they would be affirming in it, but they also were kind of like, well, like, but I'd get like, you know, they'd say, oh, you have Raynaud's, which is a circulatory sort of autoimmune thing. They're like, but it's not associated with autoimmune. And then I'd get, you know, some other thing. And over the years, it was all these separate things. And then I'd go into doctors with like the menstrual stuff and be like, these are related. These are related. And they'd be like, no, they're not. And I'd be like, and like only recently, which is nice, like there's, you know, histamine, mast cell sort of research going on. Yeah. And I did like, bro, have you ever done a liver cleanse and a mucoid plaque cleanse?
No. I don't even know what that second thing is.
Oh, it's heavy metal. It's intense. It's like, it's literally dropping a lot of heavy metals. It's a lot of like, and you have to do it in a sort of protocol because you can't just do a liver cleanse and then, you know, recirculate toxins. But what was crazy to think is that me, a healthy, quote unquote, individual, had so many gallstones to pass. So many, like I had 500 liver flukes, which is a parasite in your liver.
Wow.
And I've been tested for parasites. And they were like, nope, it's not that. But then I find out they don't test for that in like, and so... Yeah. Even when you're trying, but I was saying, to your point though, last year when I did those cleanses, it was so affirming to like see that come out and be like, I told y'all. And then to see like certain circulatory things go away. The IBS that I've been diagnosed with, never again. And it was this like really healing moment, but then it came with this bittersweet, like, oh shoot, there's no one coming. Oh shoot, it's going to continually, if another thing comes up, you're still going to be the one to have to go, that doesn't sound right. That doesn't whatever.
I totally relate to that. Like part of my rage is going to doctors and being like, I know more about this than you. Like,
how do you get paid that?
So much.
I know.
I get really angry and then I get upset and frustrated at my husband and then that's not fair. And then I don't have a good way of handling it. Like, I don't know. But it is so frustrating that because research is not done on female bodies, because research is not done on these hormone fluctuations for the most part, like we have to do the research ourselves. We have to basically like get a medical degree in our own bodies. And it's like, we have to. Like, I don't like that we have to, but we have to. Especially if we don't have the money to shell out for like functional medicine 100% of the time, for holistic doctors, for like, and even then it's like, then you have to protect, if you are able to exist in that world, you have to protect yourself from people who are not actually experts in this or who are just trying to get your money.
Causing more harm because they don't actually know how to do those things. Yeah.
And so when we talk about like people in female bodies being very vulnerable in this medical system, we're not just talking about like, oops, you did the wrong surgery on me. We're talking about like, which happens, but we're talking about like, you go to a doctor that's covered by your insurance, you don't know if they even know that the thing you have exists. Like because our system and part of and this is like, so much of this is so systemic and so just like, yes, some doctors suck, but it's mostly a structural thing of like,
that's it.
OBGYNs have to, when they're going through school, they have to become experts in pregnancy, experts in like regular function of your reproductive organs, on endocrine function. It's like the amount of crap we've shoved into OBGYN. We are half of the population and our bodies work differently than the other half. And yet there's one subset of doctors who are supposed to be able to handle every single thing going on in our bodies. And it's like, yeah, it is dumb that we have to go to a doctor who like lightly studied all of this like huge amount of stuff. And like, if you're lucky, they'll figure out what's going on with you and send you to someone who's an expert in that. But there's no guarantee of that. And a lot of doctors, for whatever reason, don't do that.
Well, one, it's like, I also like am like, I had an incredible at Cedars-Sinai, I had an incredible IBS doctor, and what he said, he was like, I don't want to put you on these meds. He's like, I don't want to, like, they're expensive, and it's going to do is continue treating this. He was like, obviously they're here for you, but if you can find other things. Yeah. And he even said that, but it's still, he couldn't find them. And so, like, it's also just so funny because you think about like someone coming in to a dermatologist with cystic acne that's like so aggressive, and then, you know, they just either go on Accutane or go on something else, and it's like, that's great for treating the acne, but like, you're not looking at the root. Like, why would that doctor just be like, okay, we'll treat that? It's like, there's obviously a hormonal thing going on. So why isn't an endocrinologist involved here? But they're not. They're just not.
Well, even endocrinologists, the hormone, so there's the HPA axis in endocrinology, which is hypothalamus, pituitary, adrenals. That's what endocrinologists look at. Then the other half of your endocrine system is the HPO axis, which is hypothalamus, pituitary, ovarian, which is like all how your hormones are. And the endocrinologists are like, let the OBGYNs deal with that. I don't deal with that. And it's like, really? You don't deal with half of your shit? Come on. Which is just a fancy way of saying, like, I only deal with the entire endocrine system of male patients, basically.
It is. And it's like, okay, yeah, there's no way in the world your thyroid could be affected by your, you know, uterine hormones. Like, bitch, what?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's crazy. It's just a thing that is like a black box where we're not taught about it. Doctors aren't taught about it unless they're in very specific little corners of medicine. And then we're shocked when so many people are having symptoms that aren't getting treated. And it's like, yeah.
Were you going to other doctors for different things, being like, is this, like, was it kind of throwing paint at the wall, or was it just, again, swallow it? Because I think most people just have to swallow it.
I just swallowed it. I think if my pain had been more widespread, like if it had been happening at times other than like right around my period, I would have been forced to try harder to get answers earlier. But because it was just, I would lose a day, maybe a day and a half from this. And not every month. Like you, it would be like some months, sometimes I'd go months without having death cramps. And so like, that's like the intermittent reinforcement of like, maybe it's gone forever. Like maybe I'll never have to deal with it again.
I honestly think that's worse. I think other symptoms sometimes are like affirming that you are sick, and to not have it is like so easy to then just like internally be like, come on, figure it out.
Yeah. And so the combination of like not being taken seriously by doctors when I would ask them about it and not getting anything helpful from them, like at all, and then having it not happen super regularly. Although, like, looking back, it's like, that's regularly. Even if it's every few months, it's regular.
Super regular.
But in it, you're like, no, sometimes yes, sometimes no. It doesn't matter.
Yes, because also you don't want it. And also, who could track that like they're a damn vigilant... Like,
well, and
you're living your life.
I started just like having a lot of coping skills for it. Like I started tracking my period with a period tracking app like pretty early on when those first came on the market, so that I would literally like know when to be scared. Like,
yeah.
So I could know like if I have a little twinge in my belly, like, and it's the right time, like, take action. But
go back and look. You're like, oh yeah, it's about time for one. Yeah.
Yep. And so like sometimes I would get death cramps when I would ovulate, not just right before my period. And so I just always had a shitload of ibuprofen on me.
Which also has its impact on your gut, is having to take constant ibuprofen. Yeah.
Yes.
And that, yeah, it's just like, it's so infuriating though, because you are coping and like in the best way that anyone could. And we spoke up top where I said, like, I do think anyone coping with illness is in a creative process, right? Because there's creative ways to survive. And I think you being able to talk about this will release a lot of shame, because even the worst stuff, even getting fucked up or drunk or like, you're surviving, you're coping, like, and you have to release the shame and get help you need. But I think a lot of people with chronic illness are drawn to creative ways of coping that aren't necessarily, the most approved of, or like hiding and isolating. I think there's a lot of isolation that happens with women in this.
Well, and in the episode that just came out, episode 4, is all about the research that's happening. And one of the people I interviewed, she's a psychologist, and she did group therapy for a group of high school age girls who experience severe menstrual pain, which is, the technical term is dysmenorrhea. And all they did, like, there was no medication involved. There was no, they taught them some breathing exercises. They educated them a little bit on like, here's like what is probably happening inside of your body. Here are the conditions that might be causing this that you could ask your doctor about. But mostly they just had them talk to each other and tell each other stories of how bad their pain is and describe their pain to each other. I think they did like 5 or 6 sessions. And they found that these girls had markedly lower pain levels when they rated their pain for a year afterwards.
That
where
makes me cry.
Literally just talking, knowing you're not alone, talking about this pain with other people that understand it. Like,
so
that
beautiful.
lowers your experience of pain. And she was like, that makes sense because our brains are interpreting the pain. Like, we feel pain in our brains, actually.
And also as a bid for connection to like help us. We're in pain. Yes.
And our brains hate the feeling of being isolated or shamed. And there's so much pain. There's so much shame around periods and like not being able to keep up and being dirty and be like that something's wrong with us, that talking to other people, like being understood, validated, relieves that whole part of the pain experience, which is more than we think it is.
Well, I even think one of the things that always had me have appreciation for it is that my clothes, my fashion is a extension. It's a third arm. It's a full extension of me. And if I would have to go out in like a baggy t-shirt and like whatever, and like I was viscerally affected. I was not a person that I wanted to talk to at a party. I would like, and it wasn't because like I didn't have self-worth or whatever. I felt like I was in a straitjacket. I like couldn't express myself. And so then I just wasn't having fun. And then it affects every aspect of that connection when you don't feel good in your body. Yeah. But say you're around people who are like, oh, me too. Like you're like, oh, okay. Oh, we're all in. Yeah. Okay. Like it's like you get to connect more.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So that was very validating as like a retroactive reason to do the podcast, is like, I might actually be lessening my own pain by sharing it with people and like hearing their
100%.
reactions to it. Yeah.
100%. Well, I think it is like, right, it's permission, perspective, and process, right? Like you're giving people permission to forgive themselves, to research, to validate their own pain and change their perspective on it because it's in community now. And that I think is really healing. I know you to be like, Erica and Mariah, my wonderful producers, have spoken about what a great podcast producer and creator and live show creator you are. And I'm wondering with this, they have, yes. But I'm wondering with this, like if you've attempted to put this story or try and help people with this story in other ways before this, or was this like, here are my skill sets and I'm going to put it in a podcast, or it was like, this is best told through a podcast?
Ooh, yeah. I think this particular story, like my story and my search for answers just felt really like a podcast was the right format for it. And I'm the co-founder of a theater in New York called Caveat that puts on like science entertainment, like science comedy, infotainment, whatever you want to call it. There's no like
it's a
good,
lovely
snappy
space
word for
in
it.
The Lower East Side, baby. Yeah.
Yeah. And I developed a show there called Doctors Without Boundaries, where two ER doctors who also were like entertainers hosted a comedy show where comedians would come on and talk about their medical issues. And then the ER doctors would come out and like just sort of chat with them about their medical issues. Like, and we had very clear disclaimers of like, this is not medical advice.
I love that. I want that back. I need the show back.
Yes, it actually is still running at Caveat.
Is it really?
So you can, yeah.
That's amazing.
It's different hosts now, but it's still running. And it's super fun. And doctors have such a funny perspective on things because they have seen so much, especially ER doctors. They've seen everything. And they also like have so much insight into like why you experienced something the way you experienced it. But through that, we were developing that show and we were kind of like doing test cases. And I was like, I'll be a test case. I get these horrible periods. Like what's happened? And one time I went to the ER for my pain and it was the worst. And they did this, they did that, like, and it didn't help. And I felt so bad. And so and these two doctors, their jaws were on the floor because they were like, I can't imagine treating a patient that way. Like I can't imagine, and so that was kind of the first time that I had actually like talked to like a medical professional who wasn't currently like a doctor of mine. And we actually had time. One of these doctors had a twin who was a gynecologist. And so the twin came to a show and I sat with him and like talked to him about it. And that was the first time I heard the term adenomyosis, which is like endometriosis, but it's inside the muscle of your uterus.
This is the first time you had heard it?
Yes. This was in 2018. But that was the first time I had heard about endometriosis, but I hadn't heard adenomyosis. And this doctor was like, oh yeah, that can cause horrible, painful periods and sometimes heavy bleeding, like all this stuff. And so like, I feel like that like clued me in of like, I get more information talking to doctors in social situations or like for shows than I do in the doctor's office in those like 7 allotted minutes.
7, also there's like a litigious aspect where they don't want to, can't be held like culpable. And then that's where you talk about the system's wrong. Because it's like these doctors can't be like, but it could be this. Because then they get sued for, which is cool in America. We love that.
So fun. Yeah.
Okay, so that's where you're like, okay, if I can use my yapper, then I'm getting info.
Exactly. Yeah. And like my ideas for shows always come from something that's bothering me, where I'm like, I can't find the answer to this question and I really want to, and other people must be curious as well. I also developed a show at Caveat called Why Your Train Is Fucked, which was literally just me being on the train, having one of those things come on that's like, this train will be going express to blah, 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 due to this thing. And it's like, why? Why do we have a system that works like this? Like, why? What are the reasons my train just got fucked up? And I started like trying to look that up on my phone while I was, stuck in limbo. And it was like, oh, in 1930, the Rockefellers decided to do this, but the trains have two different kinds of tracks and they can't go together here. So they did this instead. And it's like, and that's why your train is fucked today. And it's like, oh, this would be so fun to like get into, because the MTA is such a, this was in New York, so this was the MTA.
This is a rich volume
it was like there's
yeah.
so much here, and there's like New York politics is a never ending, like especially historically is such a never ending like well of characters of like, hey, here there's this mayor who was only mayor for 6 months, but
and this
like,
guy's wife was like pissed, so she did this to the MTA.
yeah, and like this guy was mayor for 6 months, and he used to work for one of the two big subway companies at that time, and they fired him. And so while he was mayor, he like consolidated the subway into one thing that was overseen by the city, basically just as a fuck you to that company that fired him. We call him the pettiest mayor New York has ever had, which not sure that holds with Eric Adams, but
or maybe the largest impact that any mayor has ever had.
yeah, but it's just like, I love these like simple questions that touch your day-to-day life, that if you trace back if you actually do the work to like trace back the answer, it touches so many weird things in history. It introduces you to so many strange characters, and the answer is really satisfying and also a funny story.
I think I adore your process, because I think I run into a lot of people who have, I kind of call it like Emperor's New Clothes process, where it's like, you're like, this guy's naked, right? Like, and you see it, and everyone else is like, no. You're like, I think he's naked. Let's ask some more questions. You know what I mean? It's like, and you're also not even like upset that other people. You're like, oh, you guys don't see this? Yeah, okay, we're gonna have to talk about this because he's for sure naked. And like, and so I love that technique where it's like your creativity is born of like, surely, like it's just like it's almost. A little like annoyance where you're like, well, how did this start happening? Like, where did this begin? And then you go to, I mean, it's similar to what you're doing. You go to a root cause. You go to a root source of what this was to try and see why things became what they became.
Right. And I think part of it, especially with this project, has been like maintaining some naivety or naivete, however you say that, of like, because obviously you ask the question, why can't I, a cis woman, get treatment for this thing that is pain that no one believes me? And it's like, well, the answer is patriarchy and bias and like medical misogyny. And it's like, yes, but what specifically? And how did we get there? And like the hypocrisy of like, we all think and accept that we have a healthcare system that is there to help us. Like, that if you are in extreme pain and you need help, you go to the ER and you get help and they help your pain. And then when that doesn't happen, I'm like, okay, but why?
Why? But why?
But I know it's bias. I know it's medical misogyny, but like how exactly and where exactly and who is benefiting from it exactly and who is in a position to fix it?
I think like, I know what you're saying in naivete, because it's like, it would be perceived as childlike when people are like, this is just the way things are. And you're like, but why? But why?
Yes.
And so it's like unwilling to accept a condition that we've been told is like a mature system thing. So, you know, you're coming from this sort of perspective of like, why can't things be different? Okay. And can you repeat that back to me? Great. Did you hear yourself?
Right.
Cool.
Of just like, look, we all want a system that works for us. And everyone at every layer is saying that. Everyone at every, like, no one would disagree with the statement, we want a system that works for everyone who is seeking help. No one would be like, I don't want that. Like, no. And yet we are every day, everyone at every layer of that system is accepting very small things that are changeable that are not helping. We are accepting bigger things. And it's just like, oh, like, yes, it's very radicalizing. And it's also like so simple and fact-based.
Well, it's like, thank gosh that you ask these questions, though, right? Because when people say it's just misogyny, it's just patriarchal system, like that is exhaustion speaking, because then when you make it so big, it presumes that you cannot make an action that would make an impact. Right. And when you're saying like, okay, let's get smaller, though, because then this does apply. And I think a lot of people don't like that because then they'd be responsible for making changes that they don't want to. But it is. Yeah. It's like it does trickle back to that decision you're making that day with that person. And like, I even think about it down to the curation of the people you're speaking to, because I don't think it's a coincidence you spoke with Dr. Darian, if I pronounce it correctly.
Dr. Darian Sutton, yeah.
Yes. Oh my God. And what I thought was magnificent about him is that one of the reasons he was so viral is in the pandemic, the way he was so transparent in the way he spoke. And he was not mollycoddling people, but he was comforting people with a delivery of information directly. And that, I think, is that micro impact that sets someone apart, because other people were like, well, previously in history and this, and they were like being indirect or whatever. It's like, no, you don't have to like make it okay. You just have to actually be truthful. And I think you even choosing the doctors you're speaking to in that way, and like, you know, you're speaking to, you know, women, people of color, all these different people who in different ways this invalidation manifests, despite like, not despite, like, even if it isn't physical pain. But I think that's important. And I'm wondering if like that was just, again, intuitive or something that you set out to make sure you were including.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely something that I'm very aware of the privilege that I hold as a cis, white, straight woman in a thin body, like, or a average body, whatever. Like, I am very aware of that. And I also know that, like, as shitty of a time as I've had in the medical system, in some ways my experience is best case scenario. And so, like, I wanted to make sure that I was curious and getting answers for more than just myself. That yes, I in this process I am getting answers for myself, but I'm also getting other people's questions and other people's perspectives, as you say, and like that I am not taking anything for granted in terms of like, it was so helpful for me to know that other people were having similar experiences to me. I also want to know about the experiences people are having that are dissimilar from me, but connected.
Yes, that's what excites me about what you're doing. And that's why I wanted to highlight it, because I think that you seeing this structure applied in different areas does unite us. That is the sort of intersection where we can meet and then make bigger changes, instead of just being like, this sucks for us, let's fix this. Like, it's like, oh, well, actually, if we all fix it all together, like, it's going to work better.
And I'm also like, you know, I'm a pretty active feminist, and I also am very aware of the pitfalls of white feminism. And that happens very often in medical spaces of like, there'll be a movement often started by Black women who are like, hey, we're dying. Can somebody fucking care, please? Can we change this? Can we like, can you do what you say you want to do and help us? And then the people who benefit from that are most often white women. And it doesn't often go both ways. Yeah.
It's notable you're doing it differently, because it is like, I do kind of, I'm not like, I don't not like them. I just kind of go away from more white feminism, sort of like, the girlies found out we had this. And it's like, God bless, we're educating, but I don't, okay. Like,
yeah.
And so
like, everybody,
that, yeah.
the more people and the more different kinds of people are talking about this kind of thing openly, fantastic, great. Like, some of it does make me go, oh, not for me. Like, not my vibe.
Exactly. And I think that's hard because it's like, that's the people who have the funding, the access, the voice to have the conversation. And so it's like, when you do have voice and access, like, we should include other people. And I think listeners should listen to this, because you do make effort to do that. And that's like what we all should be doing in all of our art.
Yeah. And I just think it's boring to hear, like, I'll be the first to say my story is one that hundreds of thousands of cis white women have experienced, is like having pain for a long time, having it dismissed by doctors, and then getting a diagnosis that's a very common diagnosis. And like, it would be pretty boring to bring on 100 of me, like, to talk about that. And so I'm very interested in how, like, other people living in different bodies, people living in different situations, people living with different amounts of knowledge about things, like how different amounts of resources, like how a person with one amount of resources is coping and trying to live with this versus someone with a totally different set of resources. And so like I'm very curious about that, partly because like if I can do something differently that helps me, great. But
Great.
also
100%.
so many different people are looking.
Art.
Yeah. And so many people are looking for answers. Yeah.
So many people looking for answers, so many non-binary female-bodied individuals, so many trans individuals like who are, also put on hormones without continual care after that and deserve to have the education to best help themselves and continue to affirm their bodies.
Absolutely. We have I have a episode coming, episode 7, the one about mental health. I just recorded with Max Gross, who's a trans man who just had a hysterectomy due to endometriosis and gender reasons. And so we had such a good conversation about it's such a fun trust a comedian to be able to come into a conversation about chronic illness and mental health, and we just had a blast.
Oh yeah, because it's a mix of so affirming, but also oh my god, the pain and chronic illness, and it's oh wow, I'm so excited to listen to that one. Yeah, and I'm so grateful that you're highlighting, because it's all different bodies that are experiencing these things.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah,
that's so
and all different areas of vulnerability. We're not all going to lose access to care at the same rate. And, when our healthcare is threatened, it's not all at the same time. And that's on purpose. And the more we know about other people, the more stories that we hear, the more we give a shit about that.
Say that. I am so excited. I need this to pop off. I'm excited. And I know it will. I'm just excited for it, I have to transition us to my final segment, but I could gab because I'm a yapper as well.
Yes.
2 little yappers. My final segment is called Thank You for Holding My Poems. And a poem is can be anything, truly. It's very abstract. It's a moment. And it originated from a Russian poet who had to have, in a time of, revolution, had to have her friends memorize edits of her poems and hold them. And, we've kind of spun that out to just moments of messiness, of pain that either you've held for someone or someone has held for you. And it can be really small. It can be a hello on the worst day of your life. Or it can be someone gave me, a $75,000 grant to make a podcast. Although that's not her situation. I'm just saying but, so I would love for you to share a poem over anything that comes to mind with that.
Ooh, okay. This is a dumb one.
I
don't know why this is what feels important to share. And I don't know why it is in no way a important or pivotal moment, but it is something that I think back on all the time. In my early 20s, I was dating a guy and it was pretty casual, and I was spending the night at his house, and I woke up in the middle of the night with death cramps, and I tried to kind of quietly deal with it, see if it was going to be a bad one or an okay one. And it was a bad one. And so he eventually woke up and was like, "What's going on? Are you okay? Are you sick?" I was like, "Okay, I am going to be throwing up every 10 minutes for the next, I don't know how many hours. I'm in a ton of pain. You can't do anything about it. So I'm sorry. This is just what's happening." And he proceeded to get a deck of cards and do magic tricks to distract me.
That is never was I thought you were going to ever be saying. That's never how I thought that was going to go.
No, and it was in the moment, it was really annoying. I did not.
Perfect.
At the moment, I was not this is so sweet. This is so nice.
You were like, buddy.
I was like, I'm going to, I would rather you go back to sleep.
Yes.
But looking back, and I didn't
God.
date this guy for a long time. This was not which
makes it even sweeter. That makes it even sweeter.
But it was just, it was he didn't, he asked what he could do to help. He got me water, and
you said magic trick.
There literally I was like, there's nothing you can do. And he just did what he could. He tried to help, and he didn't deny my pain or dismiss it or insist we go to the hospital. He was just like, "Okay, you're in pain. Do you want to see magic trick?
And I want to be of service. Like, and I believe you. And this is how I can help. I'm actually really good at this.
Yeah. And it's like, it reminds me of the like story of Justin Timberlake, like playing the guitar for Britney Spears when she had her like abortion. It was in her memoir. She like was
I'm not laughing. I'm sorry.
She was having these, she took the abortion pills and she was having these horrible pains, which I imagine are similar to death cramps.
Similar to death cramps, yeah.
And he, I guess, like got his guitar and like played her music. And in the memoir, it's sort of like she had only gotten the abortion because he wanted to. She didn't really want to. And like, and so it's a little more sinister.
But it's also him playing is like, yeah, no, let me like, oh no, this is hell. That makes me want to throw up. That makes me want to throw up.
But this is I feel like this is like a pure version of that.
The version that Justin would have wanted of like, oh gosh, how can I help?
He was doing.
Yes,
yeah.
This is what Justin thought. No, I agree that they are different. And also, oh my God. Oh, I love that poem. I think that's so sweet. Because that is a poem, right? It's like this kind of personal moment where I also like that like it wasn't necessarily like received, because those moments, it's like sometimes you don't know how to like perform for it or receive it, or it's not what you want. And so you're not going to be like sick. But you can see the attempt in it and also the pure acceptance of your pain of like, okay, yeah, no problem. That's so sweet to look back on.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh. I don't even know. Maybe I feel like it's a poem because like I don't even know what I think or feel about it. It just feels
it's an abstract, pivotal, and meaningful moment. Yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
Exactly.
And I say with these poems too, it's like you don't necessarily know how those little teeny moments did ripple out your life and did make other things easier and okay. And so when someone's like, I don't know why this one is coming up, I'm like, there's a reason. Like, and it doesn't have to be linear, but it's meant something to who you are now. And I think that's beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, Kate, Helen, Downey, this has been so wonderful. Is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners?
No, listen to Cramped. Go to Caveat if you're in New York. And please, actually, one thing I would like to share. I don't think this comes up very often for many reasons, but it is everyone knows how hard it is to get a podcast off, like an indie podcast off the ground. One thing I didn't consider is how much harder that would be when you layer on how little people want to talk about periods.
Yeah, dude.
I literally am trying to do something with word of mouth about how people don't talk enough about periods, and it's
Seems
like
logical.
Right?
Seems
no,
logical.
I get other podcast topics might come up in conversation pretty often. You can be like, oh my God, yeah, I just heard this podcast, but the likelihood that you'll be talking about period cramps with a group of friends, I mean, maybe you do. I hope you do. That would be awesome. Yeah. But it happens statistically much less than any other topic, and so. I just would ask everybody listening to be like, why don't you talk more about periods and cramps? Ask your friends if they get bad cramps, even if you don't. Ask your friends how if they're like, oh, got my period, be like, how are you doing? Do you need anything?
Like, what's that like for you? Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, ask what their experience is, because you may think you know what that means. You probably don't. You probably have a very different experience of cramps or a period than the person you're talking to. And I think that's so interesting. And you can both learn a lot from each other.
Oh, the way I've been learning, just because like my own brain of like, that's what that means to you. Like that was the whole play. I'm like, and again, the words we go back to, we only have one word for it. We only have one word for cramps.
Also, if you get bad period cramps, start taking ibuprofen 48 hours before you're supposed to get your period. Single biggest thing that has made such a difference for my pain. Yeah. And nobody tells you.
Of course not. Not a but like it's changing. It's changing. And yes, talk about it, kiki about it, ask, what does that mean for you? When someone uses a word that is pretty singular.
Absolutely.
And talk about the period. Yes, thank you. I guess need to do that. And we're talking all gender identities, queer, trans, male, female. Be talking about it. Be nosy 100%. As shit.
Yeah. I mean, you're not gonna, it might be weird. Like people might be like, why are you asking about my cramps? And it's like, because I'm curious. Like, you don't have to talk about it, but I'm curious.
Yeah. Like, it's only going to be weird if you're doing it like in the middle of, like a meeting. Like, it's like if someone's saying, I'm not feeling great, be like, oh, is it this?
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Well, I always end the podcast by giving the listeners and you a compliment, which was a poem to me, which is, oh my God, you're so pretty.
Oh, that's so sweet. So are you.
Worse Than You with Mo Fry-Pasek is hosted by me, Mo Fry-Pasek. You can learn more about this week's guest and the Worse Than You team by checking out the show and episode copy. Worse Than You with Mo Fry-Pasek is executive produced by Erica Ghetto, Mariah Gossett, and Lauren Mandel for Good Get and Disco Nap Productions. Oh my God, you're so pretty.
Your mileage may vary, but they love to tell you to just have a baby.